What's good, everyone? It's your boy Dak908, aka the Dick Dug himself. Ladies and gents, boys and girls, and monster honeys, check it out. Today we're going to give you another video where I say I want these monsters back. It's a number of monsters. I'm not going to say how many. I actually don't know how many. I just wrote them down on my phone here, and I'm just going to tell you who they are and why I feel they should make a full return. I was going to make a video where I was like, these are the 10 monsters I don't want to come back, but I thought about it, I was like, yo, it's easier to spread positivity than it is to spread hate, to not spark up controversy. I just won't bring up what I don't like. Instead, let's bring back what I think might be cool, and maybe you guys might think they're cool too, because spoiler alert, some of them you guys have already said you want them to come back, and I figured why not make a video discussing those monsters. And without further ado, let's get into it. Number one, the first monster I'd like to return would be Agnaktor. Excuse me, a Cantor. There's a G in there somewhere, but yes, a Cantor. I would like a Cantor to come back. A monster I would usually refer to as Auntie. So you have Auntie and you have Uncle, and Uncle will be Yukon Los, another monster I want to return. So I'm going to discuss both of them right now. A Cantor and Yukon Los, Auntie and Uncle, are two monsters from the second generation that everyone knows, unfortunately, are not Elder Dragons, even though they're some of the largest monsters in the freaking game, and they hold calamitous power for what they're able to do, which unfortunately doesn't necessarily designate them to be Elder Dragons because they fall under the Flying Wyvern category, pseudo-Flying Wyverns to be exact, much like the Tigrex and the Nargacuga, Barrios, and etc. Monsters whose arms and wings are one appendage as opposed to separate. Nevertheless, these guys are amazing. They're huge monstrosities and everyone really likes them. I mean, they did really pop off in the 4th generation and 4U when they got cinematic introductions, and a lot of their gear became like tremendously amazing. You guys remember the Yuka sets, the Yuka sets where you would run Yukon Los and then like Teostra, I believe, and then Yukon Los, then Teostra, like literally in a pattern like that, and your set would be amazing. Yukon Los had amazing armor. A Cantor had amazing green weapons, noted on the green because there was a skill that allowed your weapons to be even blunt. That's what it was. What blunt? I can't remember what it's called, but like the duller your weapon is, the higher your attack gets, and a Cantor had an incredibly high attack with really dull weapons, so people would run those weapons with that skill and it'd be amazing. Its armor, I can't remember if it was fantastical, but I know that particular weapon skill use I used myself personally. I believe I used that in Gen or Gen U or whatever. Nevertheless, these monsters are fantastic. They're huge behemoths. They're amazing to look at. They have fantastical abilities. Bring these guys back. They've not been around, well, they've been around for a while, but we need to see these guys get a full HD remake, like a remaster, see what we can do with these guys with newfound technologies. They're amazing, they're fan favorites, they're huge, they're larger than life, they're basically Elder Dragons. Stop freaking, you know what you're doing, just make them an Elder Dragon or something like that, or make them so bombastically outrageously good that they might as well be. Nevertheless, with those guys out of the way, let's go to the next monster I would like to talk about, the Celtis Queen. Now, Celtis Queen was insanely cool. Its armor was top notch. It literally a 10 out of 10. It was Gundam armor. And then that Gundam armor was a fantastical Gunlance armor. I'm a Lancer / Gunlance main. These are the only two weapons that I ever use. I did dabble in some Greatsword, but for the most part, Lance and Gunlance. And this Gunlance armor was amazing to use because it had great skills, but its aesthetic was insane. So outside of those things that I personally like about it, the Celtis Queen fight was something to behold. It didn't just fight by itself. It used its Celtis, just the Celtis, its lackey, its subject, because it is a queen. They would combine like Voltron. See, they're already like the robots. I'm getting excited, I'm sorry. They would combine together. The Celtis would pick up the Celtis Queen for mobility, fly it around the map or whatever. It would actually attack from on top of the Celtis Queen as well. It would shoot its little slimy ball thingies or whatever, and it would slap the hunter if the hunter was close enough to it. The Celtis Queen was this massive brute of a freaking bug thing. I cannot pronounce that. It begins with an N, but you know, it was a massive whatever those are. Outside of its amazing attacks, it had this very unique thing that it would do with it in the Celtis where it would actually eat the Celtis and throw the Celtis at you or something like that. It's a very rare occurrence. Many people will play their entire lives and never see it actually happen. I've seen it only happen once, maybe twice, but for sure I've only seen it happen once. So it being so cool, so sporadic, so varied, so unique of a monster, totally bring this thing back. It's only been in the 1 games. I think it was in 4 and Gen, and that was it. So I don't see why I never made it to Rise. It looked like a monster that would fit in the Rise, but nevertheless, bring it back here. Heck, there's even a desert variant. So if you want to say, hey, we're in the desert, we can't bring in the Seltas Queen, there's literally the desert Seltas Queen right there. Bring it back to me, you know what I mean? Now here's a monster that unfortunately I don't really know anything about. This is just the monster I know that people who've played Monster Hunter deeper than I did. Like, I did start playing Monster Hunter in the first generation, but it was a game that I was like, okay, this game sucks, it's hard, I don't want to play it anymore. Then I played actually I never played any of Gen 2, but there's this monster called the Yama something Sasuchi whatever. People love this thing. I've never fought it. I have no ties with this thing. But if this monster has only been in one game, only one game to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, please do, give it a return, dude. We are not only in HD, we're in like Ultra HD now, like 4K. Like, it had a time to shine in World. It didn't get a time to do that. It could have got added into Rise. It didn't do that. So dude, bring it into WoW. This is a monster people have never even seen before for the most part. And from what I understand, it's surrounded by an air of coolness, mystery even. So instead of having monsters large, like literally bombastically being in your face all the time, how about add a couple of monsters that are like, dude, that thing looks pretty odd and almost alien, you know what I mean? Like, look at the thing, you know? So bring this thing back. I've never fought it, but I want to fight it. Like, you have this massive backlog of monsters who've probably never seen the light of day since they were introduced. If anything, bring this one back. I'm not a huge fan of bringing back Elder Dragons because these last couple of games have been just Elder Dragon beatdowns. Unfortunately, there's a couple of Elder Dragons on this list, but this one, if you don't bring any of them back, bring this one back. But speaking of Elder Dragons and speaking of beatdowns, Malzeno, aka Dimitri, monster that I lovingly refer to as the vampire because it's a vampire dragon. I mean, Dimitri from Darkstalkers, you know, that kind of thing. I didn't think I would like this monster that much. This monster was a ton of fun. It in its primordial form were some of the coolest fights in Sunbreak or Rise or whatever you want to call it. Bring these guys back. The teleport mix-ups, oh my god. Yo, it's like you're fighting an actual fighting game character. Like, he'll teleport here, he'll teleport there, he'll teleport there, and you're like, dude, where are you going? And then he crosses you up with some weird stuff. Primordial even has a freaking Nova. He would teleport, he would double teleport and then blow up. I died so many times, you know. Amazing monster. Its fight is honestly the reason why I wanted to come back. As far as like the story purpose goes, it is explicitly tied into that of Sunbreak and how everything in the Sunbreak story is unfolding in there. So it would absolutely not make a whole lot of sense. I'm not saying put this monster in like a day one kind of thing. Absolutely not. Bring him in like as like a DLC, because that's kind of where Monster Hunter really gets its legs from. By adding in monsters as DLC, that doesn't necessarily have to make sense with the story, but it's just, hey, here's the thing that we want to add on anyway. So monsters don't necessarily fit the bill of being within the world of being in the world of Wilds. Bring them in as DLC for us veterans to have a little a couple of callbacks, if you will. Because Malzeno's fight, in my opinion, is super good, very tough, and worthy of a DLC edition, if anything else. Now, outside of him, let's talk about a couple of monsters who were from the 5th gen. Like, I like a lot of 5th gen monsters, and a lot of them couldn't make a return, but there's a few that I actually truly and earnestly want to make a return, because they are, in my opinion, some of the more interesting and cooler monsters for their category. Let's talk first about Odogaron. O-Dog, if you will. This monster, when I first saw him, like, this thing is sick. I mean, he looks sick. He literally looks sick. Like, there's something, like, he's ill. Like he has an infection on his body or something like that. Like rotting flesh or whatever. That's cool. The aesthetic is insane. And it made sense. He was from the Rotten Vale. The Rotten Vale was a location in the game where everything was just dying and decaying and whatever. And then having a monster who's just literally basically decaying? Question mark? I don't know. I liked his aesthetic. His fight, if you weren't a Lancer, if you were a Lancer, his fight was the sleepiest thing on the planet. I'm a Lancer, it was the sleepiest thing on the planet. But his fight, nonetheless, if you're not a Lancer, it can be very threatening. And I like this mobility, the way in which it moves so often, so quickly, and traverse the area. I like that. Monsters who have interactions with the environment themselves are a massive plus to me. And in Odogaron's case, he would do that. He would leap from the walls, he would jump through the bushes or whatever. He would actually take his prey, because more often than not, when you're fighting Odogaron, he's carrying a lug of meat around or something like that. And when he would leave the area, he wouldn't leave his prey right there. He would collect his food and run to the next location where he's going to be at. Even if he's dying, he does this. So I like that. The fact that it makes it feel more livable. That way the fauna that's actually inheriting the actual level you're in, make it feel like it's an actual level as opposed to, or a world rather, as opposed to just like a very video gamey kind of thing where creature pops in, spawns out of nowhere, you beat him, and then boom, like who cares, you know what I mean? I don't like that. things that actually affect the environment that they're in, big plus for me. And Odogaron, even though he's a smaller type monster, I like him. I want him in, aesthetically appealing to the eyeballs. And as far as things go, he's one of my favorite Fang beasts. So cool, bring my man in. Or Fanged Wyvern, Fanged something, monster with fangs. I like those guys. Bring him. Now my other, this one's gonna be a bit controversial, but I have to say it. Kolv-Taroth. Kolv-Taroth is a seriously cool monster to me. Will it probably ever get in? Absolutely not. Its mechanics are probably too deeply rooted to that of what World had to offer for it, and I truly don't see it making a return given, again, its mechanics and how it was actually enveloped. But they did kind of call back some of that with the DLC quest to it, which I lovingly refer to as White Gold Taroth, because you didn't have to go through the collecting parts of the monster itself, whatever. You just went out there and swung on it, which is pretty cool. So maybe they can do that for Wilds or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. But Kolv-Taroth, for those of you who don't know, is this elder dragon that is somehow covered in gold. I don't really recall the story, but let me just tell you how it fights, okay? It literally slithers around this giant cave called El Dorado, which is a bit of on the nose, if you will, and you had to break off lots and lots of parts of its body. Now, mind you, it's wearing like this dress, and this dress is actually completely breakable. It'll completely come out of this whole overcoat, if you will, and then underneath it will show its true form, where it's actually a four-legged beast with giant horns, and then fight it to the death, or in the more often not, fight it till you break off its horn. I know a lot of people don't like the fight because it takes longer than it normally would take to kill any other monster, because there's stages to the fight that must be completed first. But in my opinion, I'm a person who enjoys the thrill of the hunt, and a monster with unique steps and ways in which it can be hunted, in my opinion, is the epitome of monster hunter, as opposed to just like walking in a freaking, like, dude, who wants to walk into a closet, okay, and beat the dog mess out of whoever's in it, and whoever comes out in the next 2 minutes is the winner? I mean, there's a place for that. It's called the arena, but like, I don't know. I kind of like monsters who really like to take that environmental interaction to another level, if you will. So Kolv-Taroth being what it's about, I want it. Now, the last 5th gen monster I'm going to talk about briefly, actually I'm looking at my list and it's a few more, is Pukei-Pukei. I discussed this earlier in my other video where I said smaller tier 2 monsters, lower ranked monsters are kind of the bread and butter. They kind of fill out the whole roster so that way it looks like there's not necessarily fluff, but in my opinion there should be way more lesser monsters than there are monsters who can completely devastate an entire habitat, that kind of thing, you know what I'm saying? And these smaller monsters just kind of fit in my opinion, make the world more immersive. So adding a monster like Pukei-Pukei, and in this case, let's do Pukei-Pukei and Tobi-Kadachi, bring both of these guys in because they're both tier 2 monsters from the 5th generation. They are really cool monsters in and of themselves. They have great ecology. The Pukei-Pukei is a very cute little thing. Everyone kind of likes him. And Tobi-Kadachi, he's actually like the closest thing you get to Nargacuga before Nargacuga actually showed up in the 5th generation. But he was still super cool. I liked his weapons. I loved his weapons design. I liked his armor design. I liked the way he fought. He was like a flying squirrel, an electric flying squirrel, who unfortunately, or rather fortunately, got a huge buff in Rise. Like, Tobi-Kadachi is a much better monster in Rise than he was in the other game. But I want both of these smaller monsters because they are really unique to the habitat in which they initially came from, but I totally believe that Pukei-Pukei, if not Tobi-Kadachi, can actually transmit themselves into the current location and wilds in the lush grassland area, and they can acclimate to the area pretty well, often than not. And I mean, who doesn't like these guys? They're nice little things. They're very good monsters to have as like stepping stone monsters before you start fighting things like Rathalos and such. So I say is bring back as many of these as you can, or add a lot more of these in-betweeny kind of monsters. So I'm always a fan of actually adding those smaller guys in, of course. And at number 1, guys, we have the Giganox. Giganox is my number 1 currently for right now, asterisk, monster that I want to return because he's been shafted by, no pun intended, the Khezu for so long. Now, I know Khezu was first. I do know that Khezu was first. Giganox made his debut in the 3rd generation, but literally it has not left 3rd generation, and in every instance where they could bring back a Giganox, they instead brought back Khezu. And I kind of understand why they would bring Khezu instead of Giganox from a gameplay perspective, because as far as like elemental typings and whatnot go, having a monster like the Khezu in a tier 2 monster role would be easier to insert because it's electric weapons and paralysis weapons, Now with Giganox, there's overlap with a lot of other lesser monsters that are tier 2 like Pukei-Pukei, because Pukei-Pukei is also poison, and Giganox is poison, and they're both tier 2 monsters. But maybe instead swap out the tier 2 monster list so that way you can actually have Giganox be the poison type monster, and you don't necessarily need to have Kezu, because maybe you bring in Tobikadachi for that, you know, that electric, and then maybe Volvodon for paralysis. So that way you really have no reason to bring in Kezu. Have Tobikadachi, Volvodon, Giganox. Boom. That's your 3. There's no overlap. Make Giganox come back, please. I love this thing. It's a little weird. It was pretty scary back when it first debuted, because it debuted as a cave dwelling monster, and in the Tri game, you actually had to light torches because it was very, very dark and you couldn't see, and Giganox was on the ceiling. It was making weird noises, it was laying eggs, it was slurping and stuff, it would drop on you, it would do flip-floppy body slam attacks. It was a pretty crazy fight in the beginning, but a lot of people warmed up to it, I myself included. It's one of my favorite monsters of all time. It's just a shame that it's been left in the 3rd generation and not seen a new game since. So please, Capcom, give us Giganox. And with that said, everyone, it's been your boy Dak908, aka the Dig Dug himself. Let me know what you guys think about my list. If you don't like my list, please let me know. Let's get a general conversation going in the comment section. I want to know who you would like to see, because I know I already did a video like this before, but hey, there's so many monsters in Monster Hunter. I can do a 3rd one of these videos, and I probably will. With that said, everyone, it's been your boy. Take care.